The Blackwood estate stretched across 20 acres of impossible perfection. 300 guests occupied golden chairs beneath a canopy of white roses that cost more than most people's houses. String quartets played music that floated through the air like perfume. Champagne worth thousands of dollars flowed freely into crystal glasses. At the altar stood Alexander Blackwood, 34 years old and worth $4.2 billion. He was the kind of handsome that belonged on magazine covers, cold gray eyes that revealed nothing, a jaw that looked carved from marble, a man who appeared to have been born wearing a perfectly tailored suit. But if you looked closely, past the perfect posture, past the practiced smile, past the carefully constructed mask he wore for the world, you would see something troubling: emptiness. Alexander Blackwood was a man going through the motions of living without actually being alive. Walking toward him down an aisle covered in white rose petals was Serena Hayes, 29 years old, draped in $200,000 worth of Vera Wang silk. She was blonde, flawless. Her smile was so perfect it looked painted on, because it was. The minister cleared his throat and opened his leather-bound book. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of—" A commotion erupted from the back of the venue. Security guards shouted. A woman screamed. Chairs scraped against the ground as guests turned to see what was happening. And then she appeared. Maya Rivers, 27 years old, burst through the crowd like a hurricane wrapped in thrift store clothing. Her dark hair was wild and tangled. Her clothes were torn in several places, clear evidence that she had fought her way past security. There was blood on her lip where someone had struck her. But her eyes were fire. "Stop this wedding!" 300 heads turned in unison. Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Serena's painted smile froze on her face. The minister stumbled backward in shock. Security tackled Maya before she could take another step. She hit the ground hard, her cheek scraping against the immaculate white aisle, but she kept screaming even as they pinned her down. "You can't marry her! She's lying to you! They're all lying to you!" Alexander stared at her, and something strange flickered across his face. Was that recognition? No, impossible. He didn't know this woman. Did he? Richard Blackwood, 63 years old and Alexander's father, stormed forward from his seat in the front row. His face was purple with barely contained rage. "Get this trash out of here immediately!" But Maya wasn't done. Even with 2 security guards pressing her into the ground, she managed to reach into her jacket and pull out something that caught the light. A watch. A Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime, one of only 7 in the entire world. Value $31 million. Alexander's watch, the one that was stolen 5 years ago, the one he had been searching for ever since. Alexander's face went completely white. "Wait!" Everyone froze. October 15th, 2019, 2:47 a.m., the Whitmore Bridge. "You know exactly who I am, Alexander."
Alexander stood completely still. He wasn't breathing. The color drained from Serena's face like water from a sink. And Richard Blackwood, for just a fraction of a second, looked absolutely terrified. "Let her go!" Alexander commanded. "Alexander, darling." Serena reached for his arm, her voice dripping with honeyed concern. He pulled away from her like she was made of acid. "I said, let her go!" The security guards exchanged uncertain glances, but released their grip on Maya. She rose slowly from the ground, bruised and bleeding, but completely unbroken, and locked eyes with the billionaire whose wedding she had just destroyed. "We need to talk," she said quietly, "and you need to know what your family did to me." 3 days earlier, everything had been different. Rain hammered the streets of downtown like the sky itself was angry. Most people had fled indoors hours ago, seeking shelter from the relentless downpour. But Maya Rivers walked through it like she didn't even notice the water soaking through her thin jacket. She had just finished a 12-hour shift at a diner called Lucky's, which was ironic because nothing about Maya's life had ever been lucky. She had $47 in her pocket, rent due in 6 days, and a shift at the hospital starting at 6 in the morning where she worked as a janitor. 2 jobs, 60 hours a week, still barely surviving. But she wasn't thinking about any of that right now. She was thinking about the newspaper headline she had seen that morning, crumpled and coffee-stained on one of the diner tables. Blackwood heir to wed Hayes heiress in wedding of the century. Next to the headline was a photo of Alexander Blackwood, the man she had saved, the man who had saved her, the man whose family had destroyed her entire life. Maya ducked into an alley and pulled out her phone with trembling hands. She opened a folder she had been building for 3 years. Police reports, photographs, medical records, a sworn testimony from a witness everyone thought had disappeared. All of it pointing to one devastating truth. David Blackwood, Alexander's younger brother, had killed her brother Lucas in a hit-and-run accident, and Alexander was about to marry David's secret lover. Later that night, Maya sat across from Carmen Reyes in a cramped legal aid office, cluttered with case files and cold coffee cups. Carmen was 35, a paralegal with sharp eyes and even sharper instincts. She had been helping Maya build her case for the past 8 months, mostly because she was one of the few people in the legal system who actually believed in justice over money. "Let me get this straight," Carmen said slowly, flipping through the folder Maya had handed her. "You want to bring down the Blackwood family, the most powerful family in the entire state, in the next 3 days." "I want justice," Maya corrected her. "There's a difference." "Not to the Blackwoods, there isn't." Carmen continued flipping through the pages, and her eyebrows climbed higher with each document she examined. This witness statement, the parking garage attendant who saw David Blackwood stumbling drunk toward his car that night, where did you find him? He was paid $200,000 to relocate to Costa Rica and keep his mouth shut, but he called me 6 months ago. His conscience was eating him alive. He couldn't sleep, couldn't look at himself in the mirror. He's willing to testify. And these photos? Traffic camera footage from 3 blocks away from the accident site. The Blackwoods had it erased from official police records, but one of the technicians kept a backup on his personal drive. He died last year from a heart attack, but his daughter found it while going through her belongings. She didn't know what it was, but I did. Carmen set down the folder and stared at Maya with an expression caught between admiration and fear. "Maya, this is enough to reopen the case, maybe even enough for criminal charges against David Blackwood. But what does any of this have to do with the wedding? Why the urgency? Why can't this wait?" Maya took a deep breath before responding.
"Because Alexander doesn't know. He doesn't know his brother killed my brother. He doesn't know his father had me in prison for supposedly stealing the watch that Alexander gave me as a gift. And he doesn't know that the woman he's about to marry is pregnant with his brother David's child." Carmen's jaw literally dropped. "Serena Hayes and David Blackwood have been having an affair for 2 years, Maya continued, her voice steady despite the rage burning beneath her words. "I have photos of them together, hotel receipts, text messages, everything. The baby she's carrying isn't Alexander's. It's David's. The entire wedding is a trap designed by Richard Blackwood to save his company from an SEC investigation through a merger with the Hayes family." "How do you know all of this?" Carmen demanded. Maya's expression hardened into something that looked almost dangerous. "Because I've spent 3 years doing nothing but watching them, learning their patterns, finding every skeleton in every closet. When you have nothing left to lose, Carmen, you become very, very patient." Carmen leaned back in her chair, processing everything. "So what exactly do you want from me?" "I want Alexander to know the truth, all of it. Not for revenge. I don't care about revenge anymore. My brother Lucas is dead. Nothing I do will change that." Her voice cracked, but she steadied it through sheer force of will. But Alexander saved my life that night on the bridge, even though he didn't know it. He was ready to jump, and honestly, I was ready to push him. But we saved each other instead, and I cannot watch him walk into this trap without at least trying to warn him. So why not just call him, send him an email, show up at his office? Maya laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You think I haven't tried? I've been trying to reach him for 3 years. Every message gets blocked. Every phone call gets intercepted. Every letter gets returned unopened. Richard Blackwood has spent millions of dollars making sure I never get within 100 feet of his son." She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "The only way to reach Alexander Blackwood is to make it impossible for them to silence me. By crashing his wedding. By crashing his wedding. In front of 300 witnesses, in front of cameras, in front of the whole world." To understand why Maya was willing to risk everything, you need to understand what happened 5 years ago. It was 2:47 in the morning on October 15th, 2019. Rain poured down on the Whitmore Bridge like heaven itself was weeping. The water below churned black and hungry, waiting. A younger Alexander Blackwood stood at the edge of the bridge, his hands gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He was wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars, but in that moment he looked like nothing more than a broken child. He was 29 years old. He ran a billion-dollar company. He had everything money could buy, and he felt absolutely nothing. 2 months earlier, he had discovered that his father was laundering money through their charitable foundation, using donations meant for sick children to hide illegal profits from weapons deals. When he confronted him about it, his father had just laughed. "Welcome to the real world, son. This is how empires are built." 3 weeks earlier, he had found out that his mother knew everything. She had known for years, and she had chosen to protect the family's reputation rather than do what was right. When Alexander begged her to help him expose the truth, she had looked at him with cold eyes and said, "Don't be naive, Alexander. This family is all that matters." 1 week earlier, his therapist had diagnosed him with severe depression. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night in 4 days. Food tasted like ash. Colors seemed muted, like the world was slowly draining of life. So here he was, climbing over the railing, ready to let the darkness take him. "Bit cold for a swim, don't you think?" Alexander spun around, nearly losing his grip on the wet metal.
A young woman stood about 10 feet away, absolutely soaked to the bone, her arms wrapped around herself for warmth. She was painfully thin, wearing clothes that were more patch than fabric, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days either. "Maya." "Go away," Alexander said flatly. "Can't. I've got nowhere else to be." She took a step closer, casual as anything, like she found suicidal billionaires on bridges every night. "Mind if I join you? Not for the jumping part, just the standing. I've been walking all night and my feet are absolutely killing me." "Who are you?" Maya shrugged. "Nobody important, just a girl whose mom is dying of cancer and who can't afford the treatment that might save her. Who are you?" Alexander laughed beside himself, though there was no humor in the sound. "Nobody important, just a man who can afford everything in the world except a reason to keep breathing." "That's poetic," Maya said, tilting her head like she was studying him. "Stupid, but poetic. Excuse me? You heard me." She walked closer and leaned against the railing beside him, close enough that he could see the exhaustion etched into her young face. "My mom has 3 months to live. 3, and I would kill for more time with her. I would give anything, my soul, my future, every good thing I might ever have, just for 1 more year. And here you are, young, healthy, rich enough to buy a small country, and you want to throw all of that away? You don't understand. You're right, I don't understand, but I know one thing for certain."
She looked at him directly, and her eyes were filled with something he hadn't seen in a very long time. Sincerity. "The universe is a jerk," she said simply. "It gives way too much to people who don't want it, and gives nothing to people who are desperate for just a little. But maybe that's not random. Maybe that's not just cosmic cruelty. Maybe you're supposed to do something with all that extra. Maybe you're supposed to use it to help people like me." "Like what?" "I don't know, but maybe you can figure that out after you climb back over this railing." They stood in silence for what felt like forever, rain pouring down on both of them, two broken strangers, connected by nothing except this moment. Then Alexander climbed back over. They sat together on the cold, wet concrete with their backs against the railing and talked until dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. She told him about her mother's diagnosis, about her brother Lucas, who had been paralyzed in a hit-and-run accident 4 years earlier and now needed constant care, about her father who had abandoned them when she was 5 years old, about the 3 jobs she worked just to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. He told her about the crushing weight of expectations that had pressed down on him since birth, about the loneliness of having everything material and nothing meaningful, about the secrets his family hid behind their perfect smiles and charitable donations, about how he had never once felt like a person to anyone in his life, only a tool to be used. At 6 in the morning, as golden sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in days, Alexander took off his watch. "This is a Patek Philippe Grand Master chime. It's worth more than enough to pay for your mother's treatment, 10 times over, actually." Maya stared at the watch like it might bite her. "I can't take that." "Please, let me save hers." Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out and took the watch from his hands. It was heavier than she expected, and it caught the morning light like a captured star. "I'll find you," Alexander said, and his voice carried a weight of promise that made her believe him. "When I get my head straight, when I figure out how to fix my life, I'll find you, and I'll make sure you and your family never have to struggle again." She smiled at him, the first real smile she'd allowed herself in months. "I'll hold you to that, rich boy." He smiled back. It was the last time either of them would smile for a very long time. 3 days after that night on the bridge, Maya sat in a cold interrogation room at the police station, her wrists handcuffed to a metal table. She had been there for 6 hours without food, water, or any explanation. Detective Morris, a heavy-set man with suspicious eyes, tossed a stack of photographs in front of her. They showed Alexander's watch. "We found this in your possession during a routine stop," he said, his voice dripping with accusation. "Richard Blackwood's office reported it stolen 2 days ago. That watch is worth $31 million. "It wasn't stolen." Maya's voice cracked with desperation. "Alexander gave it to me. He put it in my hands himself." "Sure he did. A billionaire just handed you a $30 million watch out of the goodness of his heart. You expect me to believe that?" "Call him. Call Alexander Blackwood right now and ask him." Detective Morris smirked. "We tried. He's unavailable. Family says he's been admitted to a medical facility in Europe for treatment and cannot be disturbed under any circumstances." He leaned in close, his breath hot on her face. "Here's what I think happened. You targeted him. Maybe you'd been following him for weeks, found him alone and vulnerable, drugged him or seduced him or whatever it is people like you do, stole the watch, and now you're spinning some ridiculous fairy tale about billionaires giving away priceless watches to random homeless girls." "That's not what happened. I'm not homeless. I have a job. I have an apartment." "Had an apartment, had a job. Right now you're looking at grand theft. That's 10 to 25 years in state prison." He smiled coldly. "But if you cooperate, tell us what else you stole, maybe we can work something out." In that moment, Maya realized something terrible. Alexander hadn't sent the police. His family had, and they were going to bury her so deep that no one would ever find the truth. Now, before we continue with what happened next to Maya, I need to ask you something. Are you subscribed to this channel? If you're enjoying this story, if you want to see exactly how Maya survived what came next and how she finally got her revenge, then do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. The twists get even crazier from here. 2 years passed. 2 years of concrete walls and iron bars and the slow, agonizing death of hope. Maya sat in the prison visitor's room, staring at the woman across the table from her. It was her mother's nurse, and the nurse was crying. "I'm so sorry, Maya. She passed this morning. It was peaceful, at least. She went in her sleep." The nurse wiped her eyes with a crumpled tissue. "She kept asking for you at the end. Every day she asked when you were coming to visit." Maya didn't cry. She had gone far beyond tears. "And Lucas?" she asked, her voice hollow. "How is my brother?" The nurse swallowed hard before answering. "He's declining. Without your income, we couldn't afford the specialized care facility anymore. They moved him to a state institution last month. The conditions there are—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Maya stared at the table, at the scratched metal surface that had witnessed so many similar conversations. Her mother was dead. Her brother was dying in some underfunded state facility, and she was trapped in here, helpless to do anything about any of it.
"When I get out," Maya said quietly, "I'm going to find the people who did this to us, and I'm going to make them pay." "Maya, please don't." "Not with violence. I don't want to hurt anyone." She looked up, and her eyes were ice. "I'm going to destroy them with the truth. The Blackwoods think they've erased me. They think I'm nobody, just another piece of trash they threw away. But I'm going to become their worst nightmare." Maya walked out of prison on a gray Tuesday morning 3 years ago. She had served her full sentence, 2 years for grand theft, plus additional time for behavioral issues that were really just her refusing to admit to a crime she hadn't committed. She carried a plastic bag containing everything she owned in the world, her clothes, a photograph of her mother and brother, and somehow, impossibly, the watch. They had tried to confiscate it as evidence, but it had been lost during processing. Maya suspected a sympathetic guard, one of the few people in that place who had believed her story, but she never found out for sure. She stood outside those prison gates and made herself a promise. She would find Alexander Blackwood. She would expose what his family had done, and she would get justice for everyone they had destroyed. Over the next 3 years, Maya became a ghost. She worked jobs that gave her access to the world of the wealthy: office cleaner at prestigious law firms, caterer at high society events, delivery driver for exclusive restaurants. She was invisible, just another member of the help, and that invisibility became her greatest weapon. Piece by piece, she assembled her case against the Blackwood family. She learned that Alexander had been shipped off to a psychiatric facility in Switzerland immediately after their night on the bridge. His family had told him the watch was stolen by a con artist who preyed on vulnerable rich people. They had told him that Maya Rivers never existed, that she was a figment of his breakdown, a hallucination born from his depression. By the time he returned to the United States a year later, he was different, colder, harder. He threw himself into building his own company, separate from his father's influence, and became even more successful than before. He started dating Serena Hayes, a woman specifically chosen by Richard Blackwood to stabilize him and cement a crucial business merger. Alexander never looked for Maya, because he believed she had never been real.
Maya also learned the truth about her brother's accident. 7 years ago, David Blackwood, Alexander's younger brother and the family's eternal disappointment, had been drinking at a bar for 4 hours straight. He stumbled to his car despite the bartender's warnings, drove through 3 red lights, and plowed directly into 12-year-old Lucas Rivers as the boy rode his bicycle home from a friend's house. Lucas survived, barely. His spinal cord was severed. He would never walk again. David Blackwood fled the scene. Richard Blackwood discovered what had happened the next morning and immediately went into damage control mode. He paid off witnesses. He had evidence destroyed. He sent an anonymous settlement offer to Maya's family, $50,000, in exchange for their silence about the accident. Maya's mother, desperate for money to pay for Lucas's medical care, had accepted the offer. She never knew who had been driving the car that destroyed her son's life.
It was David Blackwood, and Richard Blackwood had covered it up like it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. 6 months before the wedding, Maya got the break she needed. She was working as a maid at the Grand Continental Hotel, cleaning rooms for $12 an hour and whatever tips guests bothered to leave. She entered suite 1847 to clean it, pushing her cart of supplies through the door, when she heard voices coming from the bedroom. She should have left. Every instinct told her to back out quietly and return later. Instead, she ducked into the closet. Through the slats in the closet door, she watched Serena Hayes and David Blackwood stumble into the room, already tearing at each other's clothes. They were clearly drunk and clearly familiar with each other's bodies. "What about Alexander?" David mumbled between kisses, his hands sliding down Serena's designer dress. "What about him?" Serena laughed, pulling David toward the bed. "You know I'm only marrying him for the shares. Your father needs this merger to save his company from the SEC investigation. Once I'm officially a Blackwood, once I have access to everything, we can move to phase 2. And then what? And then we wait. A year, maybe 2. I'll divorce Alexander, citing tragic, irreconcilable differences. I'll cry beautifully for the cameras, and I'll walk away with half of his personal fortune, which is separate from the family company. We'll be untouchable, David. We'll be free." David grinned at her. "Have I told you lately that you're absolutely terrifying? Frequently. Now shut up and kiss me." Maya's hand trembled as she pulled out her phone and began recording. 3 weeks before the wedding, Maya stood in a quiet cemetery, visiting the grave of Michael Torres. He had been the traffic technician responsible for erasing the footage of David Blackwood's car the night of Lucas's accident. But Michael had kept a backup copy, hidden on a personal drive, because he couldn't live with himself otherwise. Michael had died of a heart attack the previous year, but his daughter Angela had found the drive while cleaning out his belongings. She hadn't understood what was on it, but Maya had tracked her down and explained everything. "He talked about this constantly in his final years," Angela said, handing Maya a small flash drive. "The guilt ate him alive. He was paid $50,000 to erase that footage, but he couldn't bring himself to destroy it completely. He kept saying that boy's life mattered more than money." Maya took the drive with shaking hands. "Does this show the license plate clearly?" Clear as day. David Blackwood's car. David Blackwood's face behind the wheel, time-stamped 30 minutes before the accident occurred. Finally, after 3 years of searching, Maya had proof. The night before the wedding, Maya sat alone in her apartment, a tiny studio the size of a closet with a mattress on the floor and nothing on the walls except a single photograph of her mother and brother. She stared at the watch in her hands, turning it over and over, watching the way it caught the dim light. She could sell it. Even now, even after everything, it was worth a fortune, enough to disappear, enough to start a new life somewhere warm and far away, enough to forget everything.
She could mail the evidence to a journalist and let someone else handle the Blackwood family. Stay invisible, stay safe, let the professionals deal with it. She could walk away and pretend none of this had ever happened. But then she thought about Alexander's face that night on the bridge, the pain in his eyes that mirrored her own, the way he had said, "I'll find you," like it was a sacred vow. He had been trying to do something good, and his family had destroyed them both for it. Maya picked up her phone and called Carmen. "I'm doing it. I'm crashing the wedding tomorrow." "Carmen, are you sure? There's no going back from this. If it doesn't work, they'll destroy you again." "They already destroyed me once. I survived." She took a deep breath. "And this time, I'm not going to let them silence me."
Back in the present, in the magnificent library of the Blackwood estate, the air was thick enough to choke on. Alexander stood at the center of the room, his expression unreadable. Maya faced him, still bruised and bleeding from her fight with security. Richard Blackwood lurked near the door, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. David Blackwood sweated nervously in the corner, unable to meet anyone's eyes. And Serena Hayes, still wearing her $200,000 wedding dress, stood frozen like a beautiful statue. "Talk," Alexander said to Maya. "You have 1 hour. Make it count." Maya took a steadying breath and began. 5 years ago, on October 15th at 2:47 in the morning, you gave me this watch on the Whitmore Bridge. You had just climbed over the railing, ready to jump. I talked you down. We sat together until sunrise, and you told me things you had never told anyone else. And then you gave me this watch and told me to sell it to pay for my mother's cancer treatment. I looked for you, Alexander said, and for the first time emotion cracked through his cold exterior. His voice was raw, almost breaking. When I came back from Switzerland, I searched for months. I hired private investigators. I posted on every social media platform, but you were gone, vanished. The police told me you never existed, that I had imagined you during my breakdown. The police arrested me 3 days after we met, Maya replied steadily. Your family reported the watch stolen. I spent 2 years in prison for grand theft of a gift you freely gave me. Alexander slowly turned to face his father. Is this true? Richard didn't flinch. His expression remained perfectly composed, perfectly arrogant. The watch was stolen. We reported it to the authorities. I don't know what kind of fantasy this woman has constructed in her clearly unstable mind, but she has the watch, Alexander interrupted, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. The actual watch, the one that was supposedly stolen, the one I gave her with my own hands. She must have acquired it through Father. Alexander's voice could have frozen the ocean. I'm going to ask you one time, and I want the truth. Did you have this woman arrested for receiving a gift I gave her? Silence stretched through the library like a held breath. Richard's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly beneath. I did what was necessary to protect this family. Alexander closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were blazing with a fury Maya had never seen before. What else have you done to protect this family? Maya stepped forward, pulling out the folder she had spent 3 years building. 7 years ago, my younger brother Lucas was riding his bicycle home from a friend's house. A car ran a red light and struck him directly. The driver fled the scene without stopping. Lucas survived, but his spinal cord was severed. He spent 5 years in a wheelchair, slowly losing hope before he finally gave up entirely. She laid out the photographs on a nearby table, the traffic camera footage, the witness statements, the paper trail of payments and cover-ups. The driver was David Blackwood. David went pale as a corpse.
That's ridiculous. I never... Your car, your face behind the wheel, your license plate, time-stamped 30 minutes before the accident. You were coming from the Emerald Bar downtown, where witnesses saw you drinking for 4 consecutive hours before stumbling to your vehicle. David, tell me she's lying. It wasn't... I didn't even see him. David crumbled, all pretense of innocence collapsing. It was dark, and I didn't mean to. Dad said he would handle it. David, shut your mouth, Richard roared, his composed facade finally shattering. But it was far too late for silence.
"You knew," Alexander said to his father, his voice quiet and terrible. "All this time, all these years, you knew that David crippled a 12-year-old boy in a drunk driving accident, and you covered it up. You paid people off. You destroyed evidence. You let that family suffer without ever knowing who was responsible. I protected your brother. I protected this family name. That's what fathers do. You protected a crime. You protected a criminal." Alexander's composure finally broke, and he was shouting now, years of suppressed rage pouring out. "And you destroyed an innocent woman's life to keep your secrets safe." "There's more," Maya said, her voice cutting through their confrontation like a knife. She pulled out her phone and pressed play. Serena's voice filled the library, crystal clear and utterly damning. "You know I'm only marrying him for the shares. Your father needs this merger to save his company from the SEC investigation. Once I'm officially a Blackwood, I'll have access to everything. And then we wait. A year, maybe 2. I'll divorce him, citing tragic, irreconcilable differences, and walk away with half his personal fortune. We'll be untouchable." David's voice followed. "Have I told you lately that you're absolutely terrifying?" And then Serena, laughing, "Frequently." Serena's face went completely blank, all color draining from her perfect features. David looked like he was going to be physically ill. Richard Blackwood appeared to have aged 2 decades in the space of 20 minutes. And Alexander? Alexander laughed. It was not a happy sound. It was the sound of a man who had just watched his entire world collapse and realized he was finally, completely free. "My father," he said, looking at each of them in turn with something approaching wonder. "My brother, my fiancé. Is there anyone in my life who hasn't been lying to me? Anyone at all who has ever told me a single truth?" "Alexander, please, let me explain." Serena reached for him, her voice taking on a desperate, pleading quality. "Don't touch me." He stepped away from her like she was contagious. "Don't ever touch me again." He turned to Maya, and his expression softened into something almost vulnerable. "Why?" he asked. "Why go through all of this? I ruined your life. My family destroyed everything you had, everything you loved. Your mother died while you were in prison. Your brother is gone. You lost years of your life because of me. Why try to save me from this?" Maya met his eyes without flinching. "Because on the worst night of my life, you looked at a complete stranger and saw someone worth saving. You gave me everything you had in that moment. Not the money, not the watch. Hope. You gave me hope when I had none left. You made me believe that maybe, just maybe, not everyone in your world was a monster." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "My mother died while I was in prison, calling out my name, and I wasn't there. My brother gave up and died alone in a state facility because I couldn't afford to care for him. I lost everything because I met you on that bridge, and I spent 3 years wanting to hate you for it. God, I wanted to hate you so badly." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't try to hide them. "But I couldn't, because you were the only person who ever looked at me, really looked at me, and saw someone worth saving. So no, Alexander, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because you deserve to know the truth.
even if I had to bleed to give it to you." The room was absolutely silent. Alexander walked slowly toward Maya, his eyes never leaving hers. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the watch.
"This belongs to you," he said quietly, pressing it into her hands. "It was a gift, but I'm keeping it for now." She looked at him in confusion. "Because I'm going to give it back to you properly this time, without anyone trying to destroy you for having it." He turned to face his family, and his voice became cold steel. "All of you, get out of my house. The wedding is canceled. I'll have my lawyers contact each of you regarding criminal charges." "You cannot do this!" Richard snarled, stepping forward with his fists clenched. "I am your father. I built everything you have. You owe me." "You were my father," Alexander cut him off. "Now you're just a defendant. Get out before I have security drag you out in front of all 300 witnesses who are still waiting outside." Now pause for just a second. If you've made it this far into the story, I need to know you're officially part of this community. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me what you think should happen next. Should Maya forgive Alexander completely? Should she make him work for it? Let me know in the comments, and let's continue with how this incredible story ends. 1 week after the wedding that never happened, the world had completely changed. News vans lined the street outside what was once the Blackwood estate. Headlines screamed from every newspaper and website. "Blackwood Empire crumbles in spectacular scandal." "Hair exposes family's decades of criminal conspiracy." "David Blackwood arrested for hit and run, faces 15 years." "Serena Hayes exposed as a con artist, loses everything." "Richard Blackwood facing 47 criminal charges." Inside the mansion, Alexander stood at a window watching the chaos unfold with an expression that was impossible to read. The door opened behind him, and Maya entered, escorted by Alexander's assistant. She looked different now, clean, rested, wearing clothes that actually fit, purchased by Alexander's staff despite her repeated protests that she didn't need charity. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. He didn't turn around immediately. "The district attorney called this morning. David will likely serve 8 to 12 years. My father is facing multiple counts of fraud, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. He'll probably die in prison." He paused. "Serena has been cut off by her family and is currently trying to sell her story to tabloids for grocery money." "Good. They all deserve what's coming to them." "Is it good?" He finally turned to face her. "My entire family is going to prison, Maya. Every single person I grew up with, everyone who was supposed to love me, they're all either criminals or enablers. I have no one." "You have yourself." "Is that supposed to be comforting?" "It's supposed to be the truth." She walked closer, her voice gentle but firm. "You survived them, Alexander. That's not nothing. Most people in your position would have been completely swallowed by a family like that. They would have become just like them, but you didn't. Even when they tried to twist you into their image, even when they lied to you about everything, some part of you stayed decent. That part of you gave a stranger a $30 million watch to save her mother. That part of you talked to a poor girl on a bridge like she was an actual human being."
He was silent for a long moment. "What will you do now?" he finally asked. "The investigation is essentially over. You got your justice. The people who hurt you are facing consequences. What comes next for Maya Rivers?" She laughed softly. "I have no idea. This mission has been my entire life for 3 years. The planning, the investigating, the waiting. I didn't really think about what came after. I didn't expect to still be standing when it was over. I have a proposition for you." She raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." "My company needs complete restructuring. I've been so focused on building it that I never stopped to examine who I was building it with. I need people I can trust absolutely. People who cannot be bought, people who aren't afraid of difficult truths, people who actually see me as a human being instead of a walking checkbook. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to build something meaningful. With me. Whatever role you want. Executive position, board seat, consultant, you name it. I'll create the job around whatever you're passionate about. Maya stared at him like he had grown a second head. You don't even know me. Not really. You know one night 5 years ago and 1 hour in a library. I know you spent 3 years fighting to tell a truth that could have gotten you killed. I know you walked into a room with people who had destroyed your life and didn't once try to physically hurt them, even though you probably wanted to. I know you saved my life when you had every reason in the world to let me fall. He stepped closer. I know more about who you actually are than I know about anyone in my family. So yes, Maya, I'm offering you a job, and I'm hoping you'll consider taking it. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a deep breath. There's something you need to know first, before I can accept anything from you. He tensed. What is it? That night on the bridge, I wasn't there by accident. It wasn't some random coincidence that we met. He went completely still. I had just found out that someone in your family was responsible for my brother's accident. I had spent weeks tracking down information, trying to figure out who had been driving that car. I thought you were the driver. I came to that bridge specifically to find you. She forced herself to meet his eyes. I was going to confront you, maybe hurt you. I didn't know what I was going to do exactly, but I wasn't there to save anyone. I was there for revenge. Alexander said nothing, waiting for her to continue. But then I saw you climb over that railing. I saw your face. I saw the pain in your eyes. And I knew, instantly, that you weren't the person I was looking for. You were just as much a victim as I was. So instead of pushing you, I pulled you back. You saved my life even though you hated everything I represented? I didn't hate you. I hated what your family did. And I realized that night that there's a difference between a person and the family they come from. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had just revealed. My family has spent my entire life treating people like chess pieces, disposable, interchangeable. My father sees every person he meets as either a tool to be used or an obstacle to be eliminated. He raised me to think the same way. He met her eyes directly. And you, a complete stranger with every reason to want me dead, chose mercy instead. You chose to see me as a person when my own family never bothered to. I wouldn't call it mercy, Maya said softly. I'd call it recognizing a kindred spirit. Same thing.
3 months later, Maya Rivers stood at the head of a boardroom table in Blackwood Tower, looking out at a room full of executives who clearly didn't know what to make of her. Her official title was Vice President of Corporate Ethics and Accountability. Her unofficial job was to make sure Alexander's company would never become what his father's empire had been. And that's why we're implementing a complete overhaul of our charitable giving program, she concluded, clicking to the final slide of her presentation. No more shell organizations, no more tax shelters disguised as philanthropy. Every single dollar will be tracked, documented, and accounted for. Full transparency with the public. Several executives shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. This will cost us millions in tax advantages, one of them complained, his jowls quivering with indignation. It will also cost us approximately 0 prison sentences, Maya replied calmly, which I think we can all agree is preferable to the alternative. A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. Alexander, sitting at the head of the table, didn't bother hiding his smirk. After the meeting ended and the executives filed out, grumbling among themselves, Alexander caught up with Maya in the hallway. You handled that well. They all hate me. They'll learn to respect you, or they'll be replaced. Either way, the outcome is acceptable. She laughed despite herself. Is that how you solve all your problems? Just replace everyone who disagrees with you? It's efficient.
They walked together toward the elevator. There was an ease between them now, something that had grown slowly over the past few months. Professional, comfortable. But lately, Maya had noticed something else growing alongside it, something neither of them had acknowledged yet. Something that made her pulse quicken when he walked into a room. "Dinner tonight?" Alexander asked, his tone deliberately casual. "Another working dinner? I think we've reviewed every department's budget at least 3 times. Actually, I was thinking this time we could try something different." Maya stopped walking and turned to face him. "Alexander Blackwood, are you asking me on a date?" He didn't flinch. "Yes, I am." "Do you think that's wise? I work for you. People will talk." "You work for the company. There's a distinction. The company has a board of directors and shareholders. I'm just one voice among many." He paused. "And if this makes you uncomfortable in any way, I'll withdraw the question immediately. No pressure, no consequences. I value you far too much to risk making you feel obligated." She studied him carefully. This man who had every reason to hate her, whose family she had systematically destroyed, whose entire world she had torn apart to get justice for her own, and who had given her a second chance anyway. "One condition," she said. "Name it."
We go somewhere without tablecloths. I've eaten enough fancy food in the past 3 months to last a lifetime. If I see another truffle-infused anything, I'm going to scream." He actually grinned. A real, genuine grin that transformed his usually severe face into something almost boyish. "I know a hot dog cart in Central Park, best in the city according to the vendor. He's been telling me that for 3 years, and I've never actually tested the claim." Sold. 6 months after that first hot dog date, Maya stood in a quiet cemetery as the sun set over the hills. 2 headstones stood before her. Lucia Rivers, 1965 to 2019. The best mother a girl could ever ask for. Lucas Rivers, 2005 to 2020. Gone too soon, remembered forever. She placed fresh flowers on each grave, the same arrangement she brought every month without fail. "Hey, Mom. Hey, Lucas. It's me again." She sat down on the grass, drawing her knees to her chest like she used to do when she was a little girl seeking comfort. "So, I did it. Everything I promised. The people who hurt you, who hurt us, they're all in prison now. Richard Blackwood got 22 years. David got 12. Serena got 5 for fraud and conspiracy. The truth is finally out there for everyone to see." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "And I think I'm actually happy? Which feels weird to say, wrong almost, like I don't deserve it after everything that happened, like being happy is somehow a betrayal of what we lost." She traced her brother's name with her finger. "But I remember what you said, Lucas, right before you died. You made me promise not to let this eat me alive. You said, 'Don't become bitter, Maya. Find something beautiful in the world and hold on to it. Don't let them take that from you, too.'" Her voice broke slightly, but she steadied it. "I think I finally found it." Footsteps approached from behind her. She didn't turn around. She already knew who it was. Alexander appeared beside her, holding a second bouquet of flowers. He sat down on the grass without a word and placed his flowers next to hers. "Hello, Mrs. Rivers." "Lucas." He addressed the headstones like he was meeting old friends. "I'm Alexander. I'm the reason your daughter's life went sideways for a while, and I'm more sorry for that than I can ever express. I know I can't fix what happened. I know I can't bring you back or give her back the time she lost, but I promise you both, on whatever honor I have left, that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to her." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "Alexander!" "I mean every word, every single word." She looked at this man, the billionaire, the broken boy on the bridge, the survivor, and saw something she had never expected to find: a future. "They would have liked you," she said softly.
Yeah? Yeah. My mom always said I needed someone who could keep up with me, someone who wasn't intimidated by how stubborn I am. She smiled through the tears forming in her eyes. And Lucas would have absolutely demanded to see your car collection. Alexander smiled back. I have 12 cars. He could have driven any of them. He was 15. And? She shoved him lightly and he caught her hand, held it. Maya. Yes? I love you. It was the first time either of them had said those words out loud, the first time either of them had dared to acknowledge what had been growing between them for months. She didn't hesitate. I love you too. 1 year later, they stood together on the Whitmore Bridge at sunset, the same bridge where they had first met 5 years earlier. But instead of rain and darkness and despair, there was golden light and flowers and hope. 50 guests sat in simple white chairs arranged on the bridge. Not 300, just the people who actually mattered. Carmen, who had helped Maya build her case, stood as maid of honor, openly crying. Alexander's college roommate, the only friend from his old life who had proven genuine, stood as best man. And at the altar, really just a simple wooden arch covered in ivy and wildflowers, stood Maya. She was wearing white, not a $200,000 designer gown, but a beautiful vintage dress she had found in a small shop downtown for $150. She had never looked more beautiful in her life. Alexander walked toward her, and for the first time since she had known him, he wasn't wearing any armor. No cold mask, no practiced smile, no walls to keep people at a safe distance. Just pure, unguarded joy. The minister, an old friend of Carmen's, smiled warmly at the couple. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Wait! Alexander held up his hand. Everyone in attendance immediately tensed. Please, no, not again. But Alexander just reached into his pocket and pulled out a familiar object. The watch. The Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime that had started everything. 5 years ago, on this exact bridge, I gave this watch to a stranger who saved my life. I told her to sell it, but she didn't. She kept it, even when keeping it cost her everything, even when she went to prison for it, even when she lost her mother and her brother and years of her life. He held the watch out to Maya. This watch was the first promise I ever made to you, a promise I couldn't keep because I was too lost, too broken, too controlled by my family to find you. But I'm not lost anymore, so I'm keeping my promise now, 5 years late. He placed the watch gently in her hands. This is yours. It always has been. Maya's tears were flowing freely, but she was smiling so wide her face hurt. I don't need a watch, Alexander. I know, but I needed to give it to you, to close the circle, to finally finish what we started on this bridge. She looked at the watch in her hands, this impossibly valuable object that had caused so much pain and somehow, miraculously, led to so much joy. Then she turned and handed it to Carmen. Carmen's jaw literally dropped. Maya, this is worth $30 million. I know exactly what it's worth, and I know exactly what it means. She looked at Alexander, then back at Carmen. It means second chances. It means hope when everything seems hopeless. Sell it and donate every penny to the Children's Hospital in Lucas's name. Start a fund for families who can't afford treatment for their kids. That's what Lucas would have wanted it used for. She turned back to Alexander. All I need is you. The minister cleared his throat, wiping his own eyes. Perhaps we should continue.
Gentle laughter rippled through the guests. Do you, Alexander Blackwood, take Maya Rivers to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, for as long as you both shall live? I do. His voice was steady and sure.
And do you, Maya Rivers, take Alexander Blackwood to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, for as long as you both shall live?" Maya looked at this man, the billionaire who had almost jumped off this very bridge, the broken boy whose family had destroyed her life, the survivor who had rebuilt himself from the ashes of his family's crimes, the man who had given her a second chance when she had given him one first. Her answer was simple and absolute. "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me by the state of New York, I pronounce you husband and wife." The minister beamed at them. "You may kiss your bride." Alexander pulled Maya close and kissed her as the setting sun painted the sky behind them in shades of gold and rose and amber. The guests erupted in applause and cheers, and somewhere Maya knew her mother and brother were watching, finally at peace. 1 year after the wedding, Maya sat on the porch of their home, reading a book of baby names. Not the Blackwood estate. Alexander had sold that monument to his family's crimes within months of the scandal breaking. Too many bad memories, too many ghosts. This was their home, a house with a big backyard and a porch swing and a garden Maya had planted with her own hands, large enough to be comfortable, small enough to feel like home. Her hand rested on her rounded belly, 7 months pregnant. Alexander came through the door carrying 2 cups of tea. He settled beside her on the porch swing, and they rocked gently together in the warm afternoon light. "What are you reading?" he asked. "Baby name books. I'm stuck between Lucas if it's a boy and Lucia if it's a girl." "After your mom and brother?" "After my mom and brother." He considered for a moment. "What about middle names?" "I was thinking Michael, after the technician who saved the evidence that eventually saved both of us. If he hadn't kept that backup, none of this would have been possible." "Lucas Michael Blackwood." Alexander tested the name aloud. "I like it. It sounds strong. It sounds like someone who overcomes obstacles." "That's the idea." They sat in comfortable silence, the swing creaking gently, a warm breeze rustling through the garden. "Hey," said Maya suddenly. "Yeah? Thank you." "For what?" "For that night on the bridge, for the watch, for looking for me even when they told me I wasn't real, for believing me when I showed up at your wedding covered in blood and dirt, screaming accusations at your family." She laughed softly at the memory. "For stopping everything to listen to what must have looked like a crazy homeless woman." "You weren't crazy, and you weren't homeless." He kissed her forehead. "You were the bravest person I had ever met. You still are. We almost destroyed each other, you know, that night on the bridge. Either one of us could have made different choices. You could have jumped, I could have pushed. We were both so broken, so close to the edge. But we didn't fall. No, we chose each other instead. 2 broken strangers who somehow recognized that the other person was worth saving." The swing creaked gently. The sun warmed their faces. "Alexander." "Hmm?" "I love our story. I wouldn't change any of it, not even the hard parts." He pulled her closer, careful of her belly, and pressed a kiss to her hair. "Neither would I." And in that moment, on the porch of their home, with their child growing between them and the future spreading out ahead full of possibility, Maya Rivers finally understood something she had spent years trying to learn. Some stories end in tragedy, but some stories, the ones where broken people choose to save each other instead of drowning alone, end exactly the way they're supposed to. With hope, with love, with home. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe and join this community. Stories like this remind us that even broken people can find their way back to hope.
Leave a comment and tell me what moment stayed with you the most.